Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening with the Crisis Magazine. My name is Laura Blackburn, and I am the chairman and publisher of the Crisis Magazine. And we are so delighted that all of you stopped by to join us for what we think will be a very interesting and stimulating evening. I want to introduce you to our star of the NAACP, the President and Chief Executive Officer, who stopped by knowing that he has another duty with him and won't be able to stay very long. But he has some very special credentials to be the secretary, I know that's a funny sounding thing, of the Crisis Board, because he is a journalist. Before he ever came to the NAACP, he had a very stimulating and varied career in journalism. And he's brought many of those skills with him in his job of operating the oldest, the largest, the most known, the most feared, the most effective civil rights organization in the history of the world. And I don't say that lightly. Please welcome President and CEO Benjamin Jealous.
Thank you, Dr. And I'm not the star tonight, so I'm not going to talk very long. But it's great to see all of you. Thank you for being here. It's really, I've been blessed to work with Jabari, fine, real fellow traveler, as we seek to revitalize and rebuild the oldest and most effective human rights organization in the entire world. We have a special mission, the hip-hop generation, in this organization and in this country. Those of us who were born after 1954, especially those who were born in the 60s and 70s, were told that we were the children of a dream. We were the kids who were supposed to grow up in a world where we would be judged by our character and not by our skin color or where we were from. And we came of age just in time to find ourselves the most murdered generation in this country and the most incarcerated generation on the planet. And only through books like Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow and people sort of a certain class beginning to realize, but it's been present in the hip-hop discourse for 20, 30 years. It's really defined my godbrother Dave Chappelle, in some ways it's defined his comedy as much as it's defined my politics. It was with Pastor Tony Lee, who has an incredible congregation that runs out of the basement of the Iverson Mall. 500 people, all of them under 50 as far as I can tell. Most of them are 20s and 30s. And it really defines his experience, defines his theology. And now as we're raising children, and we're looking at the third generation of kids in this country, right? 70s to the 90s, the 90s to 2010, and 2010, to slip into the school-to-prison pipeline is our job to shut it down. It is our job to shut the school-to-prison pipeline down in this country to make sure every school is a great school, every job is a good job. Parents just work one job and get home and take care of their kids. And the criminal justice system is really used for justice, not for warehousing people, not as an alternative to rehab or an alternative to mental health care. And that's the crisis that we are dealing with now at the NAACP. And that's why we need you active, and we need you supportive, and that's why we need you at the mall on October 2nd, when we will be spearheading a rally called One Nation. That's really designed to do two things. One is to help us keep pushing forward to revitalize and reinvigorate the spirits of the forces of hope in this country, who were just the majority just 2 years ago, but now feel so disheartened in so many ways. And to push back against this rising tide of intolerance and hatred in this country. So I hope to see you on October 2nd at the Lincoln Monument. Thank you very much, Mr. Jabari.
Thank you for the cameo appearance. One of the other things that Ben is instrumental in, that he's a visible and demonstrative father. It's very good to see him.
Now, for all of the people in here we are just delighted that you're here. I know that, is there anybody in here that doesn't know anything about hip-hop? Anybody in here who doesn't understand the impact of hip-hop in our culture? I'd be ready to raise my hand. I don't know the full impact. I just know that I like to move on. It is an exciting discussion that you're going to be in for tonight. And please keep in mind any issues that, when the time comes, that you want to raise with our distinguished guests. I'm going to introduce them just very briefly, because I think you really came to hear what they have to say. And if you have questions about where they came from, how they got to where they are, that aren't covered in the synopsis of their background that I'll give you, you can ask them later. I'm sure they'd be happy to discuss it. I'm going to start with Mr. Erin Patton. Where are you, Erin? Come on up, so they see you when I talk about you. Here's a genius. I love it when I meet geniuses that do something that I never heard of. Branding. That's a new word in our whole vocabulary. Well, this man pretty much invented branding. He is the one responsible for the successful campaigns of products like Adidas, like all kinds of other sports equipment, of sports figures. He's the one who helped them distinguish themselves as a brand. LeBron James, my two favorite dynamic women, Venus and Serena Williams, and a whole bunch more. He has written a book, he talks a lot, he's been on a lot of media discussing what he does and how he has been so successful. And to me, he rose about 10 more feet tonight because I don't know who brought who, but his mom is here with them. Stand up, please. I know there's a lot more I could say about him, but I want you to hear what he's about from him. So you go and take your seat. And this other young man, very distinguished young man, is the editor-in-chief of the Crisis magazine. Among his many accomplishments, he has brought a level of quality, of challenging literary conversation to the Crisis magazine. He's taken it to another level, really. The kinds of thought-provoking articles that he makes sure are in the publication are part of the major contribution he makes to the Crisis magazine as the editor. In his spare time, I don't know when he does all this other stuff, he's the author of several books, and the part that got me, several children's books. Now, I don't know the names of all of them off the top of my head, but later on, you can ask him the names of all of his books. And I think that's important, to make those contributions to our literature from a perspective that no one else can write for us. It has to be by us, about us. So please welcome Jabari Asim, our editor-in-chief. Now, before they get started, I have to acknowledge all the other members of the Crisis staff that do all the different things that are necessary to get a magazine published. And I can't see very good without my glasses. I see India. Stand up, India artist.
Yeah.
Stand up, come on. One of our distinguished writers.
Creative director.
Creative directors, but that's same difference. He's the one that makes it work. And somewhere I tossed Reggie. Stand up. Reggie is the guy that goes out there and hustles the ads and the fundraising and the money stuff, and we're happy to have him. Did I miss anybody from our Crisis staff? Now, I'm going to take a certain amount of privilege. One of my daughters just walked in, and I want her to stand up and I'm sitting up here if you want to sit with me. This is Judge Anna Blackburn Rigsby. At one point, before I retired, we were the only mother-daughter judges in the United States of America, of any color, of any age, of any time. And she's still on the bench. I retired, I thought, until they grabbed me to do something else with the NAACP. I have another daughter who will be arriving momentarily, and tonight will be her birthday. So when she comes, we'll give her a little birthday shout out. Now, you didn't come to hear me. We're going to turn it over to our distinguished conversationalist. You got to pull your hat back a little bit so we can see your eyes. Okay, I got it.
Can you guys hear me? I don't think it's mic.
Testing.
Hello? Hello? Yeah? Okay. Well, we're very pleased to be here at Buck Boys and Poets with Erin Patton, who is a brilliant marketing whiz. And one of the things we'll talk about a little bit is social networking. And I became aware of Erin Patton through Facebook when another friend of mine put up a posting about him saying, I just came from a lecture, brilliant lecture by Erin Patton. And he went on to say some more effusive things. So we did that. Then, of course, I Googled him to see who this brilliant guy was, later met him, and was fortunate to partake of his insights and find that he does know quite a few things. And I hope we'll get to bear witness to some of this brilliance tonight. I'm going to ask him a few questions. And when I'm done, we'll open up the floor, and other people who have questions and comments, please feel free to join in. But I'll ask a few just to get us started. Erin, advertisers seem pretty receptive toward hip-hop music and culture these days. But unless correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem that initially advertisers, Madison Avenue, marketers, etc., were that eager to embrace hip-hop when it emerged. Is that correct?
I think so. And first, I want to give all glory and honor to the Most High for this opportunity to bear witness to the fruits of the struggle and the fight for justice that this organization represents. So I want to thank Judge Blackburn, I want to thank you, I want to thank Ben Jealous and everyone with the NAACP and the crisis for this opportunity. And it's not one that I take lightly, so it is indeed an honor to be here. So thank you, and I appreciate you all coming out for what we call in hip-hop. This is a cipher, so we're going to have a cipher discussion. But yeah, I think your point is well taken. Clearly, what we've seen of late is the understanding that hip-hop music and the culture and the lifestyle certainly can be commercialized. It can certainly help brands and products meet favor in the marketplace if that's through a certain artist endorsing a song and endorsing the product in their song or video, whatever the case may be. But if we rewind the tape a few years ago, it wasn't something that was readily embraced, at least in terms of what was perceived as the mainstream. And I think that's the biggest difference. I got my career started at Burrell Advertising in Chicago back in the 90s. I'll date myself. I don't have hair in case you're wondering. So at any rate, but at that time, I was working on the Sprite business. And, Sprite's campaign was Obey Your Thirst, right? And being a product of the hip-hop generation, what I understood was really what, Obey Your Thirst is about, your own unique self-expression. And that's the one thing that hip-hop culture allowed us to have, sort of that means to express ourselves uniquely at a point where we didn't feel that mainstream gave us that opportunity to express who we were. And it was really about being an individual and being true to yourself. And so we were able to integrate hip-hop into that creative process. Some of you may remember, anyone remember Pete Rock and C.L. Smooth out there? We had Brand Nubian, a lot of artists in the 90s that were really bringing that unique, fresh creativity to the music and to the landscape. But there were only a few brands that really understood the value that connecting with the hip-hop generation meant. Sprite being one of them. I worked at Nike for many years. Nike obviously was a brand that understood that. But by and large, you didn't see a whole lot of brands at that point understanding the value of it. So you would see even those types of commercials, shown only on certain networks, if that were BET or even other cable influence networks. And now today, basically, to come full circle, we recognize, and Madison Avenue recognizes that we have the ability to influence the mainstream and the masses and our culture and our style and our preferences, what we like, how we like, the types of products, the type of packaging, the types of ideas. Let's not just do a bookstore, let's not do Barnes & Noble, let's do busboys and poets. We take things and we reinvent them and we create them, and I think they understand that. Now the difference is how that translates into economic empowerment for us, and we are all continuing to fight the struggle. I know Senator Towns in New York is holding a special session around Madison Avenue and bridging that gap, because we need to make sure that our agencies are getting the lion's share of those budgets and those creative budgets, and it's not just our culture. As I like to call it in our book, we're software developers, right? And we're our killer app is language, it's fashion, it's dance, it's music, it's everything that runs on the mainframe of corporate America, right? But the distribution of that is not controlled by us. The gatekeepers don't look like us, but the culture itself is created by us, right? That software is created by us. So we have to get to a point where we're owning that. That software, and we're in control of the means and the ways in which it's being distributed. So while we take some pride in knowing that finally we have a voice and we can turn on TV and we can see some of our artists and our entertainers and our icons captured in this context of Madison Avenue and commercializing products, but we still need to make sure that we're getting our lion's share on the back end.
And that's one of the questions I was actually going to ask you a little later on, but we can jump to it now. It seems that lately I've heard complaints from African Americans who work in marketing agencies and branding agencies, et cetera, that there used to be a part of the market that they could sort of count on in terms of market share. In other words, we'll be entrusted to market to, say, African Americans or quote-unquote urban youth, and that is changing, that they can no longer necessarily count on that. So is that what's going on Madison Avenue?
Yeah, and it's a double-edged sword, right? Because if you think about the genesis of hip-hop music and what was happening in the South Bronx, and at a time where, just out of sheer necessity, right, innovation was born. Any great renaissance, the Harlem Renaissance, any renaissance that we can think of is always born out of an idea and a desire to sort of reach a higher expression, right? And culturally, we were trying to reach that higher form of expression, and hip-hop music gave us the means to do it, right? To aspire and visualize and see, beyond our environment. One of the things, and I'm blessed that my mom is here with me tonight, and she taught us we weren't products of our environment, we were products of our imagination, right? And our education. And hip-hop music was really the means that allowed us to against the backdrop and the struggle, to start to see ourselves moving in a higher direction. And the music was not just about the brands and the products, although y'all remember Sassoon and Gloria Vanderbilt and all these Kango, all these brands back in the day that hip-hop was really channeling. But then we got Public Enemy, and we got people like KRS-One to give us that political consciousness that came with it. So the point being, we've been constantly fighting this battle of wanting to be validated, right? Wanting to know that mainstream media validated our voice, that we had a voice, and not just that we had a voice, but that voice was authentic, that voice was consistent with our experience. And so we've been fighting that battle, right? And magazines like The Crisis and being able to take our unique experience and our point of view and own it, at the same time as those things are happening. So the more commercialized forms of media, it's been a constant struggle. But now that we've found it, and the double edge to that sword is, well, guess what? We've influenced the mainstream, the way they think, the way they walk, the way they talk, and everything else. But they figure that out too. So as the cultural dynamics are shifting in this country, and even now, and when I started, we talked about multicultural marketing or diverse marketing or segment markets, and we were essentially talking about Black Americans and Hispanics to an extent. But now that's totally changed. If you look at even some agencies and campaigns, you see multicultural. You see a lot of different ethnicities, right? So the definition of what multicultural is, in our experience, is becoming diluted in a sense. As we have achieved that acceptance, and to some extent we've assimilated and we've realized those aspirations that we talked about in the music. And so what that means, though, now is when it comes to who is responsible, right, for developing the creative or coming up with the ideas, or the agencies representing these companies, a lot of times that's falling outside of the control of our traditional black-owned agencies, and so that creates a real challenge, because on the one hand, we finally have that acceptance and our influence, and that's why I titled the book Under the Influence, because it's really about how we influence industries and products and everything in between, but we now have to make sure that, while we have that, we're not diluting the culture. We're not diluting the impact that our culture can make, because as it moves through that, that distribution that I talked about, that software doesn't, so many generations that we don't, of it, that we lose the intensity and the authenticity of it, and we don't need a Norton antivirus to kind of get out there and make sure that we're being projected, that our images, are being projected in the right way. So it is a unique challenge right now, but that's where the work that I've done, and I know there are many others that are products of this hip-hop generation who came up and came of age with this mindset and got to traditional schooling and education. We're fighting, right, and we're making sure that we're at the table and we're helping companies not just to reach this audience for the sake of commercial interests, but at the same time we're moving the culture toward its highest expression.
I want to stay with that double-edged sword metaphor that you came up with. I think it's kind of related to this next question. In the pages of the crisis historically, there have been debates between artists about when artists embrace commerce, are they selling out? Okay, so that seems to be... and then on the other hand, in terms of audience, on the one hand we say we want African-American images in marketing, we want them in popular culture, we want African-American artists represented in the culture, but then when they do it, sometimes there's this pushback, well, now you've sold out because it's commercial. And we know that it's part of a larger debate that all artists have. I remember when Apple offered millions to REM to use The End of the World as We Know It for their theme song. REM famously turned them down, said, we'll never do it. And Rolling Stone said, we'd be happy. Where do we sign? And then sort of in the mainstream culture started a new trend where artists were very comfortable embracing marketing. So how does that play out, particularly in in hip-hop culture specifically, where there is this notion of the sellout, but at the same time we have hip-hop spokesmen who are very comfortable in their roles promoting products?
This is that hardball you were talking about. See, Brother Jabari said he's going to be a couple curveballs, and then he's going to come with some hardballs. So now I get it. That's a classic challenge that the music, the culture, the artists, have faced, really from the origin of the music. And in the book, I have a chapter called Hip Hop, Madison Avenue, and Vine, and I talk a little bit about that dilemma. And the one example I use there is MC Hammer. And some of you may remember, a lot of what MC Hammer had to contend with as he found his place, not just on the music landscape, but also because he became a pop culture icon and someone that was embraced a little more readily, right? So he had a little more appeal than Chuck D, and Chuck D wasn't going to sell KFC, right? But MC Hammer did, and I don't know if y'all remember Hammer with the parachute pants and the KFC commercial. But those, and I use that analogy in the book. But at the same time, as he was being ridiculed for those things, it was also a watershed moment in the sense that we did have a major campaign that wasn't just about the multicultural or the black consumer market, but it was literally someone who came from that culture who became an icon or a pitch man for a major company and a major brand. So those are still watershed moments, right? But it does put artists in a position where if they take that that deal, right? If they accept that, do they lose some of their authenticity? And I think authenticity in advertising is really what it's all about. And I think you can have the best of both worlds. And I think that's where you need professionals who come from the culture, who came of age with the culture, and they're able to have conversations with companies and brands to make sure that that individual is represented the right way. The problem is a lot of times the representatives for those artists or those athletes are not from the culture either. So the conversations that are had, and I've been a part of some of those conversations, and you get people making certain assumptions culturally. I call that the Joe the Boxer moment. I don't know if you guys remember the commercial with the person, the Joe the Boxers, and dance around, but somebody in that meeting thought that was cool, right? So the trick is making sure that as we take advantage of those opportunities that artists are afforded and athletes are afforded, that we're bringing the right perspective and balance to it. But it's a difficult thing for artists. But obviously, today, and as everyone in this room knows, the music industry as we knew it has really changed. It's gone, right? And part of it is because of greed. Part of it is because the labels didn't envision how technology could disrupt the industry or whatever the case may be. But the artists have to eat, right? And so sometimes when you get that dynamic, you get people that are willing to take a check. But what they're doing in the process is obviously, diluting the culture and running the risk of being, called that sellout. And I don't see that as often as I think we used to. And because of people like Hammer. And I have a lot of respect for Hammer. Hammer is actually a really close friend of mine, and the work that he's doing now on social media, I don't know if you guys know, but he's totally reinvented himself and came through adversity, and I think we have to embrace that. I think a lot of times, we're quick to point a finger at somebody, whereas if we're in that same situation, will we raise our hand and do it? We got to ask ourselves that same question. So I think it's a bit unfair sometimes to look at a certain individual and say, okay, he's selling out because he's doing something to create revenue outside of his core business. As long as it's authentic and culturally, it's moving in a positive direction. I think you can do it both ways. I think Drake and what he's doing right now, he's got. I just put a deal together for Drake and AT&T. We got a tour coming up. With him this particular fall, going to HBCUs. We're doing a bunch of different things. So it can be done. He's got a Sprite campaign that he's doing as well. So I think it's really about the artist too, and the creativity and the ingenuity. And hip-hop music has always been about those two things. That's just our DNA, creativity and ingenuity. And to the extent that we're bringing that to the table, then I think the sky's the limit.
We did an article a while back in The Crisis in which we interviewed a number of women activists and artists and writers who made a pretty persuasive case that hip-hop in recent years has been overly misogynistic, too negative in its portrayals of African-American women in particular. And what was interesting about their case was that they went beyond artists. They talked about BET and broadcasters and other entities that kind of contribute to this. How do you negotiate that minefield? It's got to be a fine line between exploitation and doing it the right way. How do you go about that when you're working, for example, with an artist? I mean, how do you factor all that in?
Well, I think it's just a matter of core values first, and if it's something just personally for me that falls outside of my core values, and I was raised by a single parent, and my mom raised 3 boys. By herself, so I have a model and a respect, for women and black women in particular, that would preclude me, as I have had to, from certain conversations with certain artists that I know, portray women in a certain light, and so that's just my core values and my own philosophy, but I think at the same time. Really what we're dealing with in some of those cases is a lack of understanding, and there's genius in a lot of those artists, and I'll use Lil Wayne as an example. I mean, a lot of times he's a poster child for a lot of these conversations, but if you really listen to what he has to say on some occasions, or even someone like Tupac, where there may have been some thread of misogyny in his lyrics, but at the same time we had Dear Mama, we had Keep Your Head Up, so I think it's about balance. And I think it's unique to all of us. We're all striving to reach that higher self, right? And there's a lower self that we're all dealing with, right? And to the extent that we have the proper alignment, with the divine, and we have a filter, right, for the images and the thoughts and the words and the things that pass through, right? Be that through advertising or music or whatever the case may be. We need a filter. Right? Some of that can be a spiritual filter, some of that can be an intelligence filter, like the Crisis Magazine, like the NAACP, to make sure that even though some of those, and that's the analogy I was getting at with the Norton antivirus, right? So some of that software that we're creating is not good software, right? There's a lot of spam out there, that is degrading to women or promoting drug dealing and some of these other things. So that's going to be part of the experience because it's unique to America, and we're a microcosm of a much larger ill in terms of this culture in America and some of the things that are propagated through music and movies and things we grew up on before we even started talking about violence. And there was Scarface and all these other things that we aspired to be these gangsters and all these other things that we were just receiving, right, through the media. And so we began to channel that because we had no other, aspiration. We had no other, images to connect with, right? And so the same can be said for how women are portrayed a lot of times in the music. And so we need that balance. We need artists like Common, the song The Light, a lot of the music that he's made, uplifting women, Talib Kweli, a lot of the artists in the business that are bringing that unique perspective, and then women themselves, and Queen Latifah and MC Lyte and many of the others that now at this point in their lives and careers are trying to establish a better model for young women to look up to. So I just think it's about balance, and to the extent that we can find the means and the ways to communicate and bring broader dimension to our culture, because we're not single-faceted. We're multifaceted people. We're not monolithic, and there are a range of experiences, that constitute the tapestry of our culture, and so we have to just do a better job of telling those stories. And when some of those things do come through, be that filter that says, we can't do that. Right, and so we have to set those types of boundaries, and so I know that's certainly important to me, as a marketer, as someone that does have the benefit, to be in position to allow some of these things to work their way onto that mainstream, to be seen, to be heard, and so that's just it's a daily struggle and challenge. And the last thing I'll say about that is, as far as the music is concerned, and hip-hop in general, and I like what Mos Def had to say. He said, people talk about hip-hop like it's this abstract, thing that's kind of living up in the mountains and, kind of comes down every now and then to scare the town, and really, and so when people say, well, where is it going? Where do you see this going? Hip-hop is going wherever we go. So if we're going in a positive direction, the conversation we're having tonight, that's putting hip-hop in a positive direction. The way that we're manifesting this culture and this experience, with intelligence and with brilliance and with love and all of the things that make up who we are, and then taking the highest expression of that culture and what it gave us. Like Biggie said, I used to wonder why Christmas missed us. Birthdays was the worst days. Now we sip champagne when we're thirsty. We have to understand that this music has given us it's given us wings. It's given us a way to see beyond our condition. It's constantly given us a way to find our way in the world and to be firm and to be proud and to walk with dignity. And so I think that's the piece of it that we have to remember, that it's about where we're going. And if we're going in a positive direction, then hip-hop's going in a positive direction, too.
Erin, I know you're also a professor and scholar, professor at Southern Methodist University, pioneer in the teaching of sports marketing. I appreciate the intellectual heft and aspects of your your conversation and your commentary, but one of the things that I appreciate about you is that you're not just a theorist, you're a practitioner. So I was hoping we could talk a little bit about how you came to know the things you know, specifically your work on Brand Jordan, and also what you do with your own company, the Mastermind Group.
I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and as I mentioned, we were raised by a single parent, so sports, that was a vehicle for us to stay out of trouble first and foremost, and we loved it because back then, and I know that may be sacrilegious. I know maybe some Ravens fans here. I apologize, but the Steelers, that was in our DNA. And we were winning Super Bowls and winning the World Series with the Pirates. We are family, Sister Sledge. We adopted that whole thing, and that was our experience, and it gave our city an identity. Because Pittsburgh's a tough place. To make it out of. August Wilson, a great playwright, is from our hometown and talks a lot about Pittsburgh, and I know some of you are probably familiar with his brilliance, and it talks about that, that sort of determination that people from Pittsburgh have to have, and sort of being, as we like to say, battle-tested and God-proven, and that Steel City is real. We have to sort of overcome a lot of obstacles coming out of Pittsburgh and sports because of the success that we found, against the backdrop of, steel mills closing down and in a depressed economy, and particularly for Black Americans, sports was, and what we experienced with sports gave us, a feeling of pride, and for me, and having two older brothers, that was part of the deal. So I tell my students, I teach in the business school at SMU in Dallas, and I tell them I'm qualified to teach sports marketing just based on geography and genetics alone. So we had all of that going on, and at the same time, I came of age, as I talk about in the book, and I started in the late 80s, early 90s. When I first fell in love with hip hop and being in high school, and at that time where the music was really becoming more than the sound, but it was becoming a conduit for self-expression and some of the things that I talked about up front. So that was my experience. And so as I left Pittsburgh and went to college to our alma mater at Northwestern University, and I pursued journalism, being someone that loved to write, which is my passion and my gift. Chose Northwestern and did a degree and then started in marketing and advertising, as I mentioned, in Chicago. And I realized at that point that I was able to bring a certain understanding, all of the cultural kind of information and trends and insights and all of these things that were just part of our experience. Why the Air Jordan was the Air Jordan. When I got to Nike, that was one of the early things that I used to tell Michael Jordan. And I was in my mid-20s at the time, a product of this hip-hop generation. So I was able to say, money, let me tell you something. Cat spent $150 for some sneakers, excuse me, he's not wearing them on the basketball court because he can't get them dirty, right? That's for the mall, that's for the movie, that's for status, that's for lifestyle, that's the hookup with these colors that we like to, as ludicrous is, the clothes and the colors got to coordinate, so that black and red and that Jordan sneaker was as much about that fashion statement than it was the performance that the designers and developers at Nike spent a lot of time and money, and I would later see it up close and personal myself, and traveling over to Asia, throughout Asia, and all of our sourcing and manufacturing facilities, and how we would come up with that great product. But I was able to break it down to that understanding that a lot of it was just about the lifestyle, right, and that there were different influences even that were motivating consumers to buy that. Certainly it was what Michael was doing on the court, but it was also about who was representing that brand and product, right? And one of the things that I did early on, as I talk about in the book, is whenever we were about to release a new Jordan, who do you think were the first people I made sure had the Jordan? Think about a cultural institution within the urban community and the black community. The first people, churches is a good one, He probably surpassed the rock the patent level one too, but that's not it. Say again? Schools, close.
Drug dealer.
Where do we go? No, I would not have lasted long. This woman right here in the front row would have made sure I left Nike on the first flight out of Portland if I had suggested something that asinine. But think about where you go on Saturday morning. Barbershop, right? So we knew that the barbers, you know, were trendsetters in the community, right? That that they were the ones that would have the product early. So I knew if I got the Air Jordan on the barber first, that the consumer, the young kids would come in and they look at the barber and say, one of those coming out, right? And it could be 6 to 9 months before they were coming out. But
the barbers got them in advance?
Yeah, I would always give the barbers the sneakers well in advance, and that created that that demand. So coming from that environment, that's really what allowed me to find some success and ultimately have the good fortune to come in and launch the Jordan brand and work with Michael and Tinker Hatfield, who's the lead designer on all of the sneakers, and being able to understand how to take Michael's personality and fuse that into a product process and do some of the things that we did there. And in closing, that's really where I really got my indoctrination and understanding of branding, and obviously Nike as a brand doesn't get any better than that. And at the same time, entrepreneurship is important to me, and I wanted to go into business for myself. I believe that we have to take our ideas and our ingenuity and our innovation at a certain point and channel it into our dreams and the things that we want to manifest and creating opportunities for others. So I started my business, Mastermind Group, and essentially that's what we do now. Working with athletes. We've worked with Venus and Serena for many years. Some of you may recall Starberry, Stephon Marbury's affordable sneaker, the $15 sneaker, which we did a couple years ago, and now launching into China as he's over there playing. But realizing that, and I have to say this, and we can move to the next one. I knew that I became successful when we launched Starberry, and I finally went home, and my mom was proud of me, because whenever I would go home and with the Jordan, I had my swagger and my Jordans, and Mom, I'm with Mike, and we're over here in Japan, and we're doing all of this, and the only thing she had to say was, why can't y'all make those sneakers any cheaper? She did not. I'm like, Mom, they know me in Hong Kong. What's up? Like, but it was like, no, we have to understand that kids are killing each other over these sneakers, and they're cutting school to get these sneakers, and we need to be about that. And so I later met Stephon, and Steph had a vision to create a $15 sneaker that had the same type of performance and benefit, maybe not the same style as sneakers like Jordan, but that touched my passion and my purpose, and so that was something that we launched and have been extremely proud of that. So that's essentially where we're at now, and the work that we're doing. It's a lot of fun.
It's interesting that you bypass these what we might consider traditional networks, and that has also happened in other fields. Michael Baisden, when he emerged as an author, he pitched the barbershops first and skipped the bookstores altogether. So that there seems to be some wisdom, at least in terms of African American communities, of not necessarily sticking to conventional formulas and going in these other areas. I also want to talk about specifically about the book, Under the Influence. What led you to take it in that direction, to do a book, and also to do the academic work? I mean, the academic work, you've talked about your passions, and I wonder how that fits in there, because the stuff you got going, you don't need to do the academic work, but you choose to do it. So obviously it's working for you. And same with the book. So talk a little bit about what motivated you to do the book in the first place. And am I understanding it correctly that you pretty much launched the sports marketing curricula at Southern Methodist University? So
Yes.
what, I mean...
I believe, that we come here, with unique gifts, and I also believe that it's our responsibility to understand, where both our passion and our purpose intersect and come together. And I like to call that the point of no return, when we're living in a divine alignment with the unique gifts and the passion and the things that uniquely come with our name on it. No different than a kid on Christmas. When you look under that tree, it says, to Erin from whatever, right? And the divine gives us certain gifts. And I firmly believe that our mission, if you will, on this earth is to discover that and to open up that box and to take out that gift so that we can ultimately bear witness to the gift giver. And that's just what's inspired me to pursue my passion for writing, because that's what I believe. And I know you know that same feeling when you're writing and the ideas are coming to you and it's coming so easy and you get the gratification of people reading your material or something that you say enlightens someone or empowers or informs. That's a great feeling, that feeling of harmony and divine alignment. And I call it the point of no return because when you find that out, that's the other part of opening up that gift. The gift giver says, okay, now you got to use it. Now you got to give it back, and you can't turn away from that, because to turn away from that is to turn away from the gift giver himself, right? And it's a place where you know what you're supposed to be doing. You know what you're put here for, and to walk with purpose and to be on purpose. And so for me, that was really what it was all about. And people always told me, and I started in journalism, and I wrote for the newspaper back home, and I'd always loved to write, and so certain people said, you have a gift, you got a book in you, you need to write that book, and so a lot of it was just that. It was friends, it was family, urging me to open up that gift, and also recognizing that I had been uniquely blessed to have experiences that to me became somewhat self-affirming. Because of what I wanted in my life and where I wanted to go. But at the same time, people were saying, that's not something that you need to take lightly. I'll never forget, when I went over to Asia for the first time, and I sent my mom a postcard, and it said, from Homewood to Hong Kong, right? And I grew up in the Homewood Western section of Pittsburgh, and so I was capturing that for her in that moment. But it's those types of experiences and having the opportunity to work with some of the people that I have. It's not about name dropping, and humility is important to me, and so it's less about that, and it's more about uplifting the culture and that rising tide lifting all boats that led me to take my experience and the things that I had been so fortunate to have and achieve and put it back and to give it back, primarily because the other thing that we all know about our culture, it's not unique to me, is, and I talk about, software developers and just being culture creators, right? But we create so much that a lot of times we don't take the time to appreciate what we've created. And that's why I was so happy when Sister India and you guys sent me that beautiful coffee table book in 100 years, and I sat down, with my boys and went through that thing, and much the same relative to hip hop culture. It's about let's take some time to capture this evolution, because we're moving so fast, and we kind of discard things, whereas others, as you talked about REM or others outside of our culture, they're still on tour. They're still out there, being uplifted and representing the music or the things that were important to them as artists and everything else and what they created. And so I wanted to create a body of work in true hip-hop form. As the Source magazine used to say, I wanted to do 5 mics. I wanted it to be a classic and something that allowed us to really see the evolution of this generation. It's less about the artists. I didn't want to write a book about, 50 Cent, made $300 million from vitamin water, or Jay-Z, hooked